the fundamental question. No one came into this room without already deciding who he or she agrees with, and no one will leave with a different mindset. What would it take for each of you? What evidence would you need? Upon what basis would you make a decision to change your mind fundamentally about the question that we gathered here to discuss this evening?
Well, Christianity would be refuted by somehow discovering the body of Christ. Theism might be, I don't know how you could refute theism. If we could find, if the universe is eternal, it wouldn't need a cause, but all the scientific evidence seems to suggest the universe is eternal, so it needs a cause, and the cause must be immaterial, spaceless, timeless. But if all that changed, that might be, at least get me to doubt theism.
My view is this. Very few people have that much difficulty thinking of themselves as objects of a divine plan. The great advantage religion has is our own solipsism. It's the same as people who don't really believe in astrology, but they'll take a quick peek to see what's happening to Taurus today. And if it says, well, might be a good time for a flutter on the stock exchange, not to think, hang on, the planets don't really move to determine my investments, but maybe, it's not impossible. It could all be about me. Religion works for most people because to have people, in a sense, horribly do want it to be true, that they are supervised, that God looks out for them, that they might be rewarded or they might be punished. It has this terrible servile advantage. That's why I consider it to be morally superior to be an atheist, to say, I would rather live without that ghastly master-slave mentality. There is not a chance, of course. There isn't a single chance that anyone will find that, hey, after all, we can definitely know that a virgin conceived or that a condemned felon walked again. And it's quite absurd for anyone to argue in scientific terms as if any of that is even thinkable. What I don't understand, and I suppose I should close by this, is why anybody should be so contemptuous, I suppose is the word, or so insecure about their own faith as not to call it that. Did you hear him say at any point this evening, this is my faith. I believe it in spite of the evidence to the contrary. I lay my life on it. I believe I'm redeemed by it. I think I will live eternally because... No, he has no confidence to say anything like that. Instead, he tries to mix it up in an area, scientific inquiry, where he's no more competent than, hey, even I am. And that was where he made his big mistake.
This watchword, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, is really just an excuse for an a priori rejection of the miraculous, because you didn't give any sort of evidence that would satisfy you with respect to one of these extraordinary claims. It made it sound like, to me, you were saying that nothing would convince you, no matter what.
No, all sorts of things would convince me.
Well, with respect to the resurrection, though, I mean, you said if there was a video camera, you'd say it was a fake stone that was rolled away. I mean, what sort of...
That would be the more reasonable hypothesis under the circumstances.
Well, but see, that's what I fear. It is. It's just an a priori rejection of the miraculous here. You're not... There isn't any kind of literary testimony, historical testimony that could convince you.
Once again, these extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence in no way implies a bias against the supernatural. It's simply an application of a rule which we use in our daily lives.
But you're saying that when you say extraordinary, really what you're saying is no amount of evidence would convince me of these extraordinary claims.
Sure it would. If tomorrow morning, immediately after breakfast, Suddenly there was an earthquake, you know, and a silvery light shone in the sky, and the leaves dropped from the trees. And I dashed outside, and there, towering over us like 100 Everests, was this giant figure with lightning playing around his Michelangeloid face. And he pointed down and saying, "Be assured, Keith M. Parsons, that I do in fact exist, and I'm sick of your logic chopping." Dr. Craig, I would join you in the pew of the church, in the front pew of the church the next Sunday.
Be going to the question and answer period. We're going to go to the question and answer period, so we'll be going to the microphone as we wind this down.
You don't think that you would have said, "Boy, I was having a hallucination."
As you mentioned a few times, and kind of disparagingly, this idea of an atheistic worldview, and then you attack that. That's a great straw man, because atheism is not a worldview. Atheism is just the rejection of the claim of theism, which tells you nothing about how that person thinks about social rules, who they want to vote for, whether they like cake more than they like pie. It's not a worldview. Atheism is simply saying God is not guilty of existing. Agnosticism addresses knowledge, right?
So you don't know.
Theism addresses a belief claim. So I would be agnostic atheist. I do not know that God does or does not exist, but I do not believe that he does.
If we define atheism as a lack of belief in God or whatever,
Sure.
then we're not really saying anything, because everything that doesn't have the capacity to believe anything could be called an atheist then.
And a water bottle could also be called a vegan if you say it's something that doesn't eat animal parts. As far as that label is being applied, it's ineffective in that case. I would say atheism is related only to those things that have the capacity to believe in the first place.
Jakmile se opravdu odřekneš Boha, všechno bude jiné. Stejně k tomu jednou dojdeš. Padne morálka, jako zanikají geologická období a lidé budou hledat radost tady na světě. Člověk zvítězí svou vůlí a rozumem nad přírodou. Pochopí, že je smrtelný, že nemá naději na vzkříšení a přijme smrt a přijme ji rád. Bude jako Bůh a všechno mu bude dovoleno. A jakmile bude člověk Bohem, přestane platit jakýkoliv zákon. Všechno bude dovoleno.
You're flogging a dead god. People get the message.
Well, millions don't get that.
Yes, but they're not going to buy a book from an atheist, are they? You're preaching to the converted, by which of course I mean the unconverted.
The time to build a strong house is before the storm arises. And that's what we do. I mean, you may be cruising through life right now, you're a Christian, everything's going fine, and you have no doubts that God exists, that Jesus rose from the dead, that the Bible is true, that Christianity is true. But then something happens in your life, whether it's an argument that comes your way, or it's a crisis that comes your way, which you should expect if you're a Christian, but paradoxically, many Christians don't expect it. They expect everything to go well for them. Whatever it is, you need to be grounded in the truth and know why it's the truth. not just have this superficial kind of emotional feel that God exists, because a lot of kids, I'll tell you, go off to college with nothing but feel-good emotionalism, and when they run into a college professor who is bent on atheism, and he gives what seems like good arguments against Christianity, they're left defenseless, Hank.
Everyone must learn that it takes sacrifice and suffering to find God. It's too easy to come to terms with God as the sun is setting. They have to find him in the cold, in the dark of night, the way I did.